Your cat might not love you, at least not in the way you think, because the way cats show trust is completely different from what most people expect from affection. Most people expect love to look obvious, attention, excitement, constant interaction, but cats don't work like that. And that's exactly why so many people misunderstand them. You might feel like your cat ignores you, avoids you, or just exists around you without really caring. But the reality is much more subtle than that. Because with cats, the strongest signs of trust are the ones that don't stand out unless you know what to look for. And once you understand those signs, the way you see your cat completely changes, because you start noticing things that were always there. The first one is something you've probably seen before but never thought twice about: the slow blink. If your cat looks at you and slowly closes their eyes, then opens them again, that's not random behavior. And it's definitely not just them being sleepy. In the wild, closing your eyes around another animal is a risk, because you're giving up awareness, even if it's just for a moment. So animals don't do that unless they feel safe enough to lower their guard. And when your cat does that in front of you, they're doing something very specific. They're showing that they don't see you as a threat. It's a quiet signal, something subtle but incredibly meaningful in their world. And if you slow blink back at them, you might notice something interesting. Sometimes they respond the same way, because in that moment, you're not just looking at them, you're communicating in a way they actually understand. But here's where people get confused. Not every cat slow blinks often, and that doesn't mean they don't trust you. It just means they express it differently. Because trusting cats isn't one behavior, it's a pattern of small choices they make over time. And one of the strongest of those choices is where they decide to rest. Cats don't sleep deeply unless they feel safe. Even when they look fully asleep, a part of them is always aware of what's happening around them. So when your cat chooses to sleep near you, or even in the same room as you, that's not random. That's a decision based on how they feel about their environment. They are choosing to be in a place where they feel comfortable enough to relax. And if your cat sleeps close to you, or even touches you while sleeping, that's an even stronger signal. Because now they're not just nearby, they're choosing physical proximity. And what makes this important is that they're not getting anything from it. You're not feeding them, you're not actively interacting, you're not rewarding them in any obvious way. They're just choosing to be there. If your cat does this too, hit subscribe. Because once you start noticing these patterns, you'll begin to understand them in a way most people never do. But trust doesn't always look calm or peaceful. Sometimes it looks confusing. Sometimes it looks confusing, like when your cat shows you their belly. A lot of people think this is an invitation, like your cat is asking to be touched. But then the moment you try, they grab your hand or lightly bite you, and it feels like mixed signals, but it's not. When a cat exposes their belly, they are showing one of the most vulnerable parts of their body. That's not something they do unless they feel safe. But that doesn't mean they want interaction. It means they trust you enough to be vulnerable around you. Not that they re-inviting you to touch them. And this is where most people misunderstand their cat completely. They confuse trust with permission. Your cat trusts you, but they still want control over what happens next. And when that control is ignored, they react. Not because they're aggressive, but because their boundaries were crossed. Once you understand that, their behavior stops feeling random. It starts feeling consistent. Now there's another behavior that most people overlook, even though it happens almost every day. Following you, not just when you have food, not just when you call them, but randomly from one room to another without any clear reason. At first, it feels normal, but if you really think about it, it's not. Your cat doesn't have to follow you. They're independent. They could stay where they are. They could ignore you completely. But they don't. They choose to move with you again and again. And that kind of behavior doesn't come from need. It comes from familiarity and comfort. You've become part of their environment, something stable, something predictable. And in a world where small changes matter to them, that kind of consistency is important. So they stay near it. They stay near you, and this is where everything starts to connect. Because when you look at each behavior individually, it might not seem like much. A slow blink, sleeping nearby, showing their belly, following you around. Each one feels small on its own, but together they form a pattern of trust, a pattern of comfort, a pattern of quiet attachment that doesn't need to be obvious to be real. And this is why so many people think their cat doesn't love them. because they're looking for the wrong signs. They're expecting something loud, something clear, something human. But cats don't express themselves that way. They don't need to, because in their world, these small signals are enough. They don't have to constantly prove anything. They just show it in ways that make sense to them. And once you start seeing it like that, everything changes. You stop questioning whether your cat cares about you because you start noticing how often they choose you, not because they need something, not because they're forced to, but because they want to be near you, and that's what makes it different. That's what makes it real. So the next time your cat slow blinks at you, or sleeps near you, or follows you for no reason at all, don't ignore it, because those small moments are not random. They're how your cat shows trust. And once you understand that, you'll never see their behavior the same way again. If you have a cat, you'll start noticing these signs everywhere now. Subscribe if you want to understand them on a deeper level. But even after understanding all of this, there's still one question that doesn't go away. If your cat shows trust in these quiet ways, then why do they sometimes ignore you completely? Why do they walk away when you call him, sit far from you for hours, or act like you don't exist at all? Because this is the exact moment where most people start doubting everything again. It feels inconsistent, like your cat only cares sometimes and the rest of the time they're completely detached. But in reality, this behavior is actually part of the same pattern. Cats don't express attachment through constant attention, and they don't feel the need to always stay near you to prove anything. In fact, the ability to walk away comfortably is also a sign of how secure they feel in your presence, because they know they can come back whenever they want without losing anything. They don't stay close out of fear or dependency. They stay close by choice, and that choice is what makes their behavior harder to read, but more meaningful. With animals that constantly seek attention, it's easy to understand their emotions. But with cats, the absence of attention doesn't mean the absence of connection. It simply means they're comfortable enough not to need reassurance all the time. And once you understand that, their behavior stops feeling random. It starts feeling intentional. But there's another layer to this that most people completely miss. And it becomes obvious when you start paying attention to how your cat behaves when you're not actively interacting with them. The moments where nothing is happening are actually the most revealing ones, because that's when your cat is acting purely based on how they feel, not reacting to anything you're doing. If your cat chooses to sit near you while you're doing something else, not looking at them, not talking to them, not giving them attention, that choice matters more than people realize. Because in that moment, they're not gaining anything from being there. They're simply choosing your presence over everything else around them. And that kind of decision doesn't come from habit alone. It comes from comfort and familiarity built over time. Now think about how often this actually happens. Your cat walks into a room where you are, even when there's nothing interesting happening there. They sit nearby, not asking for anything, not interacting, just existing in the same space as you, and then they leave again, just as casually, without making a big deal out of it. That behavior might seem insignificant, but it's actually one of the clearest signs of trust, because they're not staying for a reward. They're staying because they want to be there, and that's the difference. Most people don't notice. Now, there's another behavior that adds even more clarity to this, and it's something that feels small, but reveals a lot. The way your cat reacts to your movement. If your cat is relaxed around you, they don't flinch when you move suddenly. They don't immediately create distance, and they don't stay constantly alert. They stay loose, comfortable, and unbothered by your presence. Even when you shift, stand up, or move around them, that level of comfort is not automatic. It's learned. Because in their mind, they've already decided that you're not a threat, and that decision affects everything else they do around you. And once that decision is made, their behavior reflects it in subtle but consistent ways. Now compare that to how they behave around something they don't fully trust. They stay alert, they keep distance, they react quickly, and they never fully relax. That difference is huge, even if it doesn't seem obvious at first. And when you place yourself into that comparison, you start to see where you stand in their world, not based on what they give you, but based on how they exist around you. And that's the key shift, because most people judge their cat's feelings based on attention. But attention is not the same as trust. A cat can give attention out of curiosity, out of need, or even out of habit. But trust is shown in how they relax, how they choose space, and how they behave when nothing is happening. And that's why this entire idea of "does my cat love me" is misunderstood. Because people are looking for obvious signs instead of consistent patterns. They expect something loud, something undeniable, something that feels human. But cats don't operate that way. They don't need to, because in their world, these small patterns are enough to define everything. And once you start noticing those patterns, you realize something important. Your cat has been showing trust the entire time. You just didn't recognize it. It was there in the way they sat near you, in the way they moved around you without hesitation, in the way they chose your presence without needing a reason. And those things don't happen accidentally. They happen because your cat has learned over time that being around you is safe. And that kind of learning doesn't happen quickly. It builds slowly through repeated experiences that shape how they see you. So when your cat chooses to be near you without needing anything, that's not a small thing. That's the result of trust that has been built over time. And once you understand that, you stop questioning whether your cat cares about you, because you start seeing how often they choose you without needing a reason. And that's what makes their behavior meaningful. Not the loud moments, not the obvious ones, but the quiet, repeated choices that happen every day without you noticing. So the next time your cat sits near you, follows you quietly, or simply stays in your presence without asking for anything, don't ignore it, because those moments are not random and they are not meaningless. They are the clearest way your cat shows that you matter in their world. And once you understand that, you'll never see their behavior the same way again. If you have a cat, you'll start noticing these signs everywhere now. Subscribe if you want to understand them on a deeper level.